Well, I wonder if you, as one of the benefits that you had as a diplomat was the fact that you were somewhat anonymous. Do you? And I know that you've been involved in diplomatic kind of conversations in Africa fairly recently, as late as the late 2000s, 2009. Do you, by losing your anonymity, lose the power to be that background person to help move things along?
No, it remains. You know, first of all, I wouldn't call myself a diplomat. I will call myself a broker. After all, I'm a businessman, and
Right.
broker is more linked to business than a diplomat. I'm trying just to put two parties together and to agree on something, like a honest broker. You know, the brokers of this world still work on word and trust. You are on the telephone and you say to someone, okay, the deal is done. Nobody will challenge the fact that the deal is not done, because both parties will never give up on what they promise you to say. And this is so it's why trust and ability to be trusted is a fantastic tool and ability to do things. And in the movie you saw that at a certain moment I lost the trust I had by one party, and I had to regain that trust, which I, at the end of the day, ended. So, no, diplomat is not maybe the right things, but I will try to do the best.
Well, let's talk about those terms. One of the differences between a businessman and a diplomat is that businessmen are known for being amoral, that they generally speaking...
Why do you say immoral?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that a businessman is really not... At the end of the day, a businessman is concerned with making the best deal possible, and is it maybe a good thing to bring that businessman's amorality, not saying immorality, amorality, that one of the problems that we have, and we talked about this briefly, is that we tend to go into a negotiation with a moral judgment about the other person. And these men that you were dealing with in this conversation, in this film, if we had done that, you never would have had most of these conversations, because there were no angels amongst any of the people that you were dealing with. So is it perhaps a benefit to you that you, being a businessman, you're more concerned with getting what it is you intend to get accomplished? You want to get the deal done, than a diplomat who has to be more concerned with appearances and politics. Is there a freedom in being a businessman? Does a businessman make a better diplomat than even the diplomat does?
Okay, by asking the question, I think you get the answer.
No.
And I appreciate very, very much the fact that you are giving me now a new argument when I'm going to negotiate.
I don't know if I agree with that necessarily.
I am a businessman, so I have to I have to be amoral, and so you can trust me. I will use that.
Well, the problem is that some people would say you are immoral by being amoral, by not taking into account the fact that you're dealing with people who may have had people killed.
But you know, there is the history have shown that people who have taken this amoral or immoral attitude have been extremely successful by saving life and giving something good to the humanity. Look at Mr. Schindler from the Schindler List. If you will have a look at what he has done at the time he did it, you will say, how this man can talk to the Nazi and the people who are killing the Jews. And at the end of the day, he has been designated by the State of Israel as one of the just people, the people who have been. So, you know, in any man, in any human being, there is a humanity. And your role as a diplomat is to tickle that part of the man which you have to play with, and to emphasize enlarge this humanity. And it works.
As opposed to starting from a place of denying the humanity.
Exactly.
When you go into the conversation saying this person is a bad person, then there's no conversation.
There is no conversation. Prejudgment. What I call the prejudgment.
Right. Why do you think that we live in a time when diplomacy is not as prevalent as it might have been? I mean, I think about this movie in particular, and I have to say, I love it because although I kind of generally knew most of these facts, they had receded into the back of my brain, and there were a lot of facts that I didn't know. But there were people, in a similar situation today, this would not have been solved. This diplomacy could not have occurred in today's, well, let me ask you a question. Do you think this diplomacy could have occurred today?
Yes.
Do
Absolutely.
you agree with him? You do? Because, I mean, we're talking about African dictators, we're talking about a communist Fidel Castro who we were so opposed to and so afraid of that it seems like a conversation would have been impossible.
But he signed. He retrieved his troops. He accepted to take away his troops. So you see, there was a way. And it will be a way today, the same way. Maybe in different condition, as I said, the animosity, how do you call it in English?
Animosity.
No, not animosity, the fact that you are not known, the anonymity will not be as such that it has been at that time. But yes, they are still, and I cannot talk about it, but I am right now dealing in conflict, and very conflict which has been going on sometime for 10, 15 years. And I have opened certain doors that people have never thought about it. And so, yes, there is still a possibility. Why? Because you are going there, you are going in your negotiation with no backfeeling. You don't want the destruction of one or the other. You want both to look at the future together. And they feel it. They understand that you are not there to destroy them. You are just there to make them convinced that there is a way with the other party to build something which is a better future.
Well, we were talking about this before, but I just feel like one of the reasons that the Americans hate soccer is because there are ties, and we like to win, and that to me has become more and more prevalent as time has gone by. And the problem with good diplomacy is that a good diplomacy, as in a good business deal, nobody is 100% happy. Everyone basically gets what they need, but we as Americans, it seems like we really like to win, and that means someone's got to lose.
Maybe you have pointed your finger in the right things. Try to make both winning. This is maybe the prime objective. At a certain moment, Pigpot, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs from the apartheid regime of South Africa, is saying in the movie, I went to see this guy from Cuba and Risqué, which you saw also talking. He said, let's be both winner.
Yeah. Right.
You will be back to your leader, Fidel Castro, and you will tell, listen, I gained the independence of Namibia. And I will go to my voters, the white voter, and I said, listen, I got rid of the Cuban. So this is the fundamental objective. Let's, instead of emphatic in your negotiation of what you are going to lose, just emphatic of what you are going to win.
Right.
And then everybody is happy because they both win, or feel that they win.
Right. Do you think...
And peace is a win-win situation.
Right.
When you make peace, whatever you have lost, you have made peace, and that's the real win.
Right. Do you think, you talked about there was no Google at that time, do you think the fact that it's very difficult for diplomats to act anonymously today makes diplomacy harder?
I don't think there is a change, because when you are an official diplomat, when you are paid for that, you are paid by the government, you are paid by what I call the common thinking. So you cannot be independent. You have to express what your government thinks. So you cannot say, oh, but in that case, yes, you are right. You cannot say it if you are an official diplomat. You have to accept that you are dependent on something. It's why when people say that I was a spy or a secret agent, I couldn't have done what I have done, because a secret agent also depends on the instruction he received from his headquarters. And so this is where really, how can I say, the ability of being independent and to have your own judgment and the other knowing that you are not partisan give you extraordinary value.
What about Odile Biedi's argument that by not being associated with the government, you are somehow extra-governmental
Okay,
and undemocratic?
and democratic, of course. Let me tell you the story behind me, Madame Audi. Charming woman. The problem is, when they did the movie, the director and the producer said, we cannot say only good thing about you. We have to find people who say very ideal thing about you. So they said, okay, find them. So they went everywhere. They went to people who were supposed to know me as a bad, or I have a bad opinion. And the only person they found, I swear to God, is that woman. So she come up like we say in French, we say, cheveux sur la soupe, hair on the soup plate. You know, why this hair is there, I don't know. So maybe you have to ask her, next time you have to invite her.
Oh, right, ask her. Well, one of the arguments that you make in the film is that, and something we just talked about, was that there has to be dialogue. In order for there to be diplomacy, you can't have diplomacy with somebody you're not talking to. And that sanctions also are tended to be counterproductive. We have sanctions against Russia now, we have sanctions against Iran. Do you feel that there's no situation where sanctions, I mean, I would argue that the sanctions in South Africa was a part of the real politic of making them compliant and willing to be diplomatic. Am I wrong?
I requested that the first time the movie would be seen, the public should be in Sheffield. Sheffield it's a little town of England where they make steel. Sheffield was at the time of Madame Thatcher was a city which was where there were riots, where there were. At the time of Madame Thatcher was still calling Mr. Mandela a terrorist. Sheffield stood and was picketing, moving into the street, protesting, and it was the first city in the world who decided to be Mandela City. So there is still a big town hall in Sheffield, which is still called Mr. Mandela. No, I'm talking about the 80s, 85.
Wow.
And I talked to the audience in Sheffield and said, you saw me saying that I was against the sanctions. But the first thing I want here is to pay you respect for what you have done. Because you are part of the success at the end of apartheid. There is a distortion in the movie. If I have a critic to say in the movie, is that they didn't clearly give me a chance to express myself about sanctions. As you know, sanctions, I don't want to be too technical, are voted by the United Nations. But sanctions are of various types of sanctions. You have economical sanctions. I have nothing to oppose no reason to oppose economical sanctions. You have cultural sanctions. You cannot travel and send movies or art one country to the other. And there is another type of sanction, which is the sport sanctions. You cannot be part of the Olympic Games, or you cannot have your teams traveling anywhere. The last two sanctions, I am very much opposed, because they cut the possibility of people to travel, to see that there are other people who think differently than they think, whether they come to your country or they go to their country, and to maintain a sort of dialogues. In 1993, I met Mr. Arafat in Lebanon. At that time, the PLO was based out of Beirut. And somebody brought me to Mr. Arafat, and we talked about South Africa, and he said, you know, I made a mistake. I demand that all the Arab countries were close to my cause, the Palestinian cause, should impose sanctions to any products, any company, any individual who are dealing with Israel. I kept myself for a possibility of dialogues. This is the way I kept myself of dialoguing and opening for different channel dialogue. And please don't apply the same thing in South Africa. This is quote unquote from Mr. Arafat. This is in that sense that I'm against the sanction, because how can you reach peace and understanding if you cut any avenue for dialogues? And yes, in that case, I am against the sanctions.
It's interesting because in this country we talk more and more about how segregated people have become and that they have tended to, well, the physical manifestation is the gated community where you only live in a community of like-minded people, but there's a more metaphoric kind of gated community where people just are only talking to people who look, sound, and believe what they believe. And so in a way, it's a kind of cultural sanction because we never talk to people who believe something differently, which is really a problem. I mean, we can talk about diplomacy writ large between countries, but even in our communities, there's a kind of lack of diplomacy.
Yes, and not only that, but here in America, I've been touring America, and I've been in Atlanta, and I've been in Washington, and I've been in New York with the opening of the African House for the UN General UN Assembly. A lot of black people have found, because of what's happening now, have found some image close to what is happening right now in America. I don't say they are right, but at least there is a tendency now to say what we are seeing, what we have seen during the time of apartheid remains today. And yes, there are some groups whereby apartheid has not completely gone from the rest of the world. And one of the things you are mentioning, this gated community, you call it? Gated community is somewhere somehow is apartheid too.
Yeah. An apartheid that we all choose for ourselves in a way, and that's true of black, white, and everybody to some degree. I want the treatment of Africans in France has been a problem for France.
Not African, Arabs.
There's been North Africans, but you're right.
The French culture has been extremely open to Arabs. The president Houphouët-Boigny, who was president of Côte d'Ivoire, which is one of the prominent African countries, before becoming president of a new independent Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, was state minister of France. And when he arrived in New York, because he didn't like to travel by air, so he was invited as a minister of education by the Washington government of that time. I think it was probably Roosevelt. He decided to come by boat because he didn't like to fly. So he arrived at the port of New York, where the mayor of New York was waiting on the quay, and they put the stairs down the cruise line was there. And of course, being the most important person, he thought he was the first one to start moving down with a totally black face. And maybe 10 meters later, the white started to follow him. And the mayor didn't realize that he thought it was just there to open the gate of the window. And so he passed in front of the mayor, who was still looking at the other people, and this has been recorded. So just to tell you, in France, we never had problem with racism. Never. The blacks from our colony were part of our government during the time of General de Gaulle. The number 2 man who was the head of the Senate in the Constitution was black. Alexandre Dumas, the Three Musketeers, was black. But what happened is with the arrival of the Muslim and the Arab immigrant bringing another type of civilization, that has created problem in our country. It's not the color or the belief, but the fact that France was losing its own roots of feeling, and in my opinion, wrongly.
A fear of losing the culture.
And so that was a racism, which was not a racism because of race, but more because of fear to see a new way of thinking, a new religion taking over at school, at the house.
But is there a diplomacy that could be applied to that situation? Because it seems like those are two implacable groups who have been at each other, and it's been more of a lack of understanding than anything else.
Yes,
maybe that's not
no, but then you have to go to the roots of it. You have to go to the issue of Israel-Palestine. If you don't solve this problem, all those other problems related to Muslim, to the Muslim civilization will be always there. And what we have done with Israel is a very strange attitude. We are saying to the Israelis, whether they are Jews or Palestinians, is that find a solution between yourselves. Nobody look at the surrounding. Nobody try to solve what is around to permit the two community to talk and to find a common solution to that problem in a peaceful environment, which is exactly what happened in the movie. You know, the black African, the South African, and the white community, they start the dialogues because it was possible, peace was around. And this dialogue was without influence. Then they were in closed doors between themselves. There was no any more American or French or whatever trying to impose something. They met in a room and they find a solution together. But that was possible because the peace was around them. And this is what I try to do.
I'm going to take some questions. One quick last one. Were you afraid at all of what would happen after apartheid fell? Did you have a sense that they would be able to move forward after the system fell?
Listen, when you give a country to all its citizens the right to vote, the right to travel, the right to marry who they want, it's already a victory. You haven't lost anything. Now, of course, there is a long way to find a solution and to find a beautiful South Africa. But listen, Martin Luther King said, I had a dream. Did he die with his dream being accomplished here in America? Certainly not. Mr. Mandela had also a dream, and he died with his dream not completely accomplished. But it's our duty now to continue that dream and try to reach a position where this dream will be reality in planet Earth.
Questions? Right here? That's you again.
Great. Terrific, Phil, and thank you very much for sharing your story. It gives hope that people can actually find ways to find peace. I'm curious, one of the things that you spoke about was really about being able to find ways for people to have a discussion, whether between diplomats or interlocutors, businessmen, without necessarily being worried about a leak occurring, and to be able to speak frankly and safely. And I'm wondering, in the current situation where WikiLeaks and Snowden and everything ends up on Google, is it possible to conduct diplomacy or business in a way that will allow people to speak frankly? And is secrecy sometimes very important?
You put your point on the essence. The foundation I just created in February this year has emphasized the fact that confidentiality and secrecy will remain essential. But you know, secret can be kept if there is no paper, if there is no document, if there is no type recording of what you said. Then you can apply secret. You saw the movie, there was this exchange of prisoners. There were 6 countries involved, 6 countries, 6 governments involved. I had to deal with 6 governments: France, Holland, Angola, Mozambique, South Africa, and Botswana. Not one paper has been signed. There is not in any archive of those countries a document related to what I have done. The only thing which exists is the footage you have seen of the exchange as such. This is the only archive available. Why? Because at a certain moment, trust should prevail. And trust, the fact that you are trusted and imply that you will accept not to divulgate what you have heard. And you are absolutely right, but today you still can do that. You still can do that, yes.
It's harder, though.
Eh?
It's more difficult.
Yes, because you have always those people spying around and trying to find out what you are doing.
I think my favorite part is even, you almost kind of want to not do diplomacy. You want to do what you did, which was to put a lot of people in a room and say, we're not going to talk about business at all. We just want you to meet each other. Like, come and have them have a ping pong tournament or something where people just meet each other and then they go and talk about business. Because once they've had a chance to talk to each other and there's a, I don't know if it was in a previous movie, there was a great story of a diplomatic coup that actually I believe it was in Israel, where it was at Camp David. Lawrence Wright was writing about the fact that they thought the deal was off until somebody took pictures of somebody's grandchildren and handed them to somebody else. And once there was a sense of family, it changed everything. So everything is personal. So
Yes, as I said, there is always a human being behind any human.
yeah. Question.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la situation entre les États-Unis et Cuba?
This gentleman asked me what I think about the situation between Cuba and the United States. I don't think sanction helps. I think by isolating for what's 30 years now, so when 50 years Cuba, and cut the capacity of dialogues between the United States and Cuba has not been a good issue for Cuba. So Cuba should, America should reconsider his approach of Cuba, not by changing its opinion on the regime of Cuba. This is the right of America to think what they want about other people's regime, but at least to exchange and to make everybody understood more what is the reality of the situation. Does that answer to your question? Sort of.
Question.
Sure. I kind of want to talk about this narrative of like the white savior that's typically talked about when you think about Africa. There's a really lovely point in the film where you are finding the importance of engaging African leaders. So my question is really, did you find that the African leaders themselves perceived themselves to be important actors, primary actors, or just kind of variables to American interests, Cuban interests, French interests?
No, the argument I use with the African leaders, especially with the President Sassou Nguesso, Brazzaville, who was a Marxist-Leninist at that time, it changed since, was Africa has the role to play. Why you leave to the superpower decided of what should happen in your own continent? Africa should move in. And he received this information, and he helped me and supported me.
I have to say that I personally, when Amy asked me about this film, I looked into it, and I thought it was going to be the narrative about how he saved Africa, and if that was the case, I was not going to do it. But it's amazing how it's a wonderful story about how the people that, with the help of a lot of people.
This one is called Plot for Peace. They have other plotter.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we just take one more?
Yes.
Question? Going? Question?
For me, it seems that affiliation is more of a bigger question than anonymity. So in trying to officialize this unofficial diplomacy that you have, do you think that after it becomes official, then sort of indirect affiliations will arise and it'll make it harder for you to conduct yourself as a free individual?
I will make sure that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, so basically, once you've got a label of a particular country, or even the UN, I think has a certain kind of association with the UN because of who
Of course,
funds it.
you can be as an NGO, you can, or a charity, you can be associated with the UN or the State Department or whatever. That doesn't mean that you have to give up your independence.
No, but I'm saying that when you're affiliated with a particular country, then you are painted with that brush. But even being affiliated specifically with the UN is being painted with a specific brush because of the major countries who fund the UN. Being affiliated with the UN comes with a point of view, no?
I don't think so. I think you are not, it's not to be affiliated with the UN. I don't intend to be affiliated with the UN. I wanted to be recognized by the UN or
Right.
accepted by the UN, which is different things.
Well, I think we have to leave there. Monsieur Olivier, congratulations and thank you. So nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. Oh, and by the way, the film,
Yes. So the film is in theaters in at the Sundance Cinema in LA, as well as in San Francisco on November 5th, and October 31st on the East Coast in New York at the Village East and in Washington, D.C. And more information at plotforpeace.com.